Welcome back to The Mailman, the brand focused on breaking the stigma around male body image issues and the mental health impact it can have on you. So recently I was in touch with someone that I'd connected with on LinkedIn, someone who'd kind of done some stuff around the male body image side of things as well. I think they run their own kind of brand and community, and they've got a newsletter. And they asked me a couple of questions, which will kind of hopefully help people by featuring in their newsletter. So I thought this video today I can run through some of those questions and give you an idea of my thoughts on the topic, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. So first question is, what inspired you to start speaking out on male body image and mental health? So quite frankly, I've got to a point in my life where I am sick and tired of always having to worry about how I am being perceived by other people, and wanting to look different in order to be accepted and to fit in, to certain environments. And it's a feeling, it's a habit that I just haven't been able to shake. And it's a habit that I've had probably since primary school or elementary school. So a really young age, where I was made to feel different. Obviously, I grew up in a different part of the UK, which was very kind of white at the time. I was one of two coloured kids in my entire elementary school. So there was sort of a two-way kind of piece where I was being made to feel different. One is racially. I was having the bullying from that side, being called names, being obviously made to feel like I look different. But then secondly, from a image, body, perspective, I didn't really know that I looked different or I was bigger than other kids until I was called the usual names, associated to being overweight or fat. So that's kind of where it started, and that was a seed that just grew and grew and grew over time. It affected my confidence throughout my entire life. It affected my self-worth. I'm incredibly anxious, because it's one of those things that's now ingrained into me. And I go through kind of bouts of feeling really low because of how I look. I can't really look at myself in mirrors that often, or I go to the other extreme where I'm constantly looking at myself in mirrors, whether that's because of the way that I look. I want to see if I've changed shape, or if, I've lost weight, or if I've got, acne, or, it's an issue that I just can't seem to shake. And I know there are people out there that probably don't have these issues, and they just kind of get on with life and they look the way they do and they just feel no shame, and they just enjoy themselves, and that's what I want. And I don't know how this is going to really help, but I feel like I needed to start speaking about this just to raise awareness about the topic, and to make other people who may be suffering, like me, or they have children that they're worried about, or if they are children watching this, to kind of make it clear that we are all built different. We all look different, and that's just the world we live in. You shouldn't be made to feel different because of the way you look. And you should certainly not change the way you look because other people are forcing you to, or you're seeing social media telling you to, look a certain way, because that's going to be how you get friends. That's going to be how you get girls. That's going to be how you advance in your career. I'm a kind of a testament to all of that. I've got a family. I've got a gorgeous wife. I've got a career, and it had nothing to do with the way that I looked. I think I've gone through various ups and downs, from being massively overweight to underweight to again being overweight. I've had horrible conditions with acne. I've been on a variety of drugs, throughout my life to kind of help me. Some of them were OTC, some of them were stuff that I've just bought online because I thought I'm going to, be able to lose weight and fit in with certain groups of people, whatever it is. I wish I never did that because I don't know the damage it's now done to my body. But the key message to people out there, and that's what this whole thing is about, is I want to kind of publicly make it normal to understand that you're built different, you look different, but that's just the world we live in. And why can't that be acceptable? Excuse me. So, that's kind of what inspired me, because I've quite frankly had enough of feeling like this. And I just hate to think there are kids out there who are starting to go down that dark route that I went through, or I went down, when if they had the right support and someone to kind of represent them and to kind of speak out about this, they would be way better off, both kind of physically, mentally, in 10 years time, 20 years time, when they get to my age, they will just feel a bit more confident and better and have a bit more self-worth than I do. So I just want to give back, to try and help people, really. Right, next question. How do you perceive social media's impact on men's self-worth and confidence? This is interesting because, we all have our own news feeds, whether that's on Instagram or Facebook, or I don't really use TikTok, so I don't know, how that comes up, but they're all pretty much the same. And I think once you start to look at, obviously, one thing, one kind of topic, the algorithms work in such a way that it just feeds more of that stuff to you. I think we all get that. I think the impact social media has is it's dangerous. It's fucked, basically, because especially for the younger generations, the kids, if you start looking at, bodybuilders or fitness gurus or people that are kind of promoting a certain type of health product, that then obviously triggers other things to flow, and quite often that pushes things like obviously you've got to look a certain way, you've got to hit the gym. Quite often a lot of that then links to things like Andrew Tate, which I've got my own opinions on him and that sort of stuff, but it's not great things to hear, right? It's like that comes with other topics like misogyny and kind of ways to treat women and all of this stuff. So there's almost like a follow-on danger of having the Tate sort of topic linked to bodybuilding and gymming and fighting and stuff like that. I think generally the social media impact is really dangerous. There's no control over what the kids really see. There's a lot of stuff which pushes the perfect image. There's a lot of stuff which pushes you need to look like this hench ripped guy, muscles popping out everywhere in order to fit in with friends, in order to look normal, whatever normal is, in order to get the girls. Girls only like hench ripped guys, which is all nonsense, which is the issue, because kids at such a young age, that's what they really believe. And the more they see that on a daily basis, it kind of preconditions them. So I think the social media impact is massive, and I don't know how that's going to change, because as they go through life, there are some kids that will change the way they look to look like someone that they follow online, or they buy a fitness program through that person who's selling stuff, or they buy supplements through that person who's selling their services, and they end up looking like them, or they end up looking how they look, how they want to look, which is bigger, leaner, whatever it is. That then obviously has an impact on the other people that don't end up looking that way. or they try and they just simply can't look like, this jacked, roid head gym buddy. Like, they just can't get that way. And then they start feeling shit about themselves. They start having, self-worth issues, or their confidence drops, or they go the opposite way and then put on a ton of weight, hit depression, hit get anxiety, and suddenly they're having their own body image issues and mental health issues all combined into one, and it's all fucked. So there's a lot of things that go hand in hand with this. And how you control that, I don't know. I think that's the issue here, because social media there are controls and filters in place. How well they do, I don't know. But I think the more access kids have to this sort of content, it can just lead down a dark route, because, as I said, one side is the kind of the body image side, where you either end up looking like someone that you follow and you're happy with that, and your confidence goes up through the roof and whatever it is, or you go down a path where you don't look like that, and then you're made to feel even worse, because now all you're seeing is jacked, ripped guys constantly, and you look very different to that. And so then obviously you go down a really dark path and you have self-worth and confidence issues. The other whole side of it, as I said, was it opens up doors to other stuff. So obviously, as I said, Andrew Tate, and the dangers from that kind of content, which is just garbage, to be fair. So it's a really kind of worrying topic, because the controls aren't strong enough, and I'm all for people showing off and posting about how they've changed the way they look, or whatever it is. Those are great stories, but the message needs to be that they've done it for themselves, or they've done it because they want to get healthier and fitter, not because other people have made them do that. And some of these influencers online, you can argue that they're almost telling their audience, you don't look good enough, or you're not good enough because you look at the way that you look like you do, and you don't look like me. So yeah, I think there's a kind of a fine line there, but how you address that, I don't know. Like, how do you tackle that issue? You can't just stop everyone in that industry posting stuff, because for a lot of people that's their business. So yeah, it's a tricky one. But yeah, I mean, just addressing the topic and the question here, I feel like social media's impact is extremely dangerous on men's body image, self-worth, confidence, anxiety, depression. It can lead to some serious conditions, because quite often the viewers of this content, they probably take the content in the wrong way. And that's probably the argument from content creators is, we're putting content out there so people can be inspired, and, they want to work harder, and, they want to get healthier and fitter. But to many people, including myself, you watch this stuff and it makes you think, well, great, I don't look like that. I look like me. I would like to look like that, because you seemingly have a great life. You have everything, because you look the way you do. And so for people that don't look like that, it's almost like, well, you're indirectly made to feel kind of bottom of the barrel, basically. So that's kind of how I feel. I'm not sure if other people feel like that. But it has a huge impact on my own self-worth and confidence. So the next question, what message do you wish more men heard about their bodies or self-image? It's quite simply, we're all built different, and we all look different. We are a world where we're all made from various genes. We're from different backgrounds, different colors, different ethnicities. But ultimately, we're all built different, but we're all still valid. That's my kind of short and sweet answer. I think the more people understood that it's perfectly fine to look the way you do, and you shouldn't be judging people for the way they look, or you shouldn't be judged for the way you look. I think that's a really important message, which isn't really spoken about in the kind of the male space that much. And I think the more people we can push this message out to, the more influencers and ambassadors that kind of get on board with this, the more and more people will start to feel comfortable. They'll start to feel like they can just be themselves. They don't have to, change the way they look in order to fit in with certain environments. Even myself, when I go out, I wear like a vest underneath whatever I'm wearing, or like a compression top, so that I just feel a little bit smaller and kind of tighter, and the clothes fit better. Whereas when I'm at home, I just feel, free. But that's when I'm, in my comfort zone. So I just feel like the message for, even myself and many others is you should find comfort in your uncomfort zone. Essentially, you should be yourself wherever you are, whether that's walking down the street in wearing not wearing anything you want, but like wearing clothes that you want to wear, whether that's at the beach, if you want to just take your top off as a man and just be free to do what 99% of other people you see on the beach doing. You shouldn't feel ashamed of that. You should be able to go swimming without worrying about what other people are gonna look at you and think. And I know it's really hard to kind of do that, and it's definitely easier said than done, because these are things that I'm struggling with even after 35 years, and how many kind of up and down body issues I've been through. These are still things that I struggle with. So I'm kind of talking to myself throughout all of this, because I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to feel like I'm just able to do what I want, and I'm not going to be judged, and I'm not going to be stared at, or I look at someone and they're kind of sniggering, or talking about me to someone else, or they may not even be doing that, but I feel like they're doing that. But that's more, again, of a kind of being self-conscious and having low self-worth and confidence issues. So yeah, I think that's kind of the main message, really, is I want to kind of ensure more people are talking about this, more people just feel like they can be themselves, to understand that we are built different, but we are all still valid. Ultimately, that's the main thing. So the next question is, are there any personal stories or turning points you'd feel comfortable sharing? I mean, I've got loads of different turning points, but they're turning points from kind of different periods of my life, really. So if I think back to sort of my early years, I think a turning point at elementary school, or primary school, was the kind of first realization that I was different compared to other kids. Was I got selected to be the goalkeeper in my school football team, and the teacher handed out the kit or the shirts. Everyone just put on the shirt straight away, everyone that was selected, and then I took mine. And I firstly, just as a child, I was like 7 years old. I just put it on, but it was so tight. It was the same size as everyone else's, but I just couldn't even get it round my shoulders, as a child. And that made me kind of feel like, why is this shirt so small? But then the kind of the realization later that, oh, hang on, I'm actually a lot bigger than all these other kids. So that was like number one in terms of what I remember as a kind of turning point for me to start thinking, I am different. Secondly, I think it was secondary school. I remember being called the regular names about being fat, and obviously kind of the racial abuse. Anyway, that was sort of a separate issue, but both of those combined really did have an impact on my confidence, my self-worth, and just my kind of level of understanding just how different I am compared to everyone else. It kind of raised that through the roof. But yeah, being kind of bullied for being fat and overweight, that was really clear. The other kind of second part which is linked to secondary school, sorry, is playing sport. It was an all boys school, and there was like a clear sort of regimented process for playing sport, and that is you all get changed together, you then play your sport, and then you come back in and shower all together, and then you go off back to your classrooms. I hated that. I used to hide in the toilets and get changed, and I used to be probably one of the only kids that wouldn't shower afterwards because I was so self-conscious about taking my clothes off and going into the changing rooms and showering. I think there were a couple of times which I just didn't have a choice and I had to do it. But then I remember, people in my class looking at me and just kind of not necessarily saying stuff, but it was just more their eyes were doing the talking. They were looking at me in the way that it was like my worst nightmare. The kind of the realization that they're looking at the same parts of me that I look at and I worry about. And so that just, scared the shit out of me because it sort of permanently made me feel closed and that I'm never going to be able to do this again, which was really difficult because then I started playing rugby a lot. And there were plenty of times, where I just avoided the showers, or I would get changed before everyone else would come into the changing rooms, or I would play around with my sports bag and just kind of look for something. But I would be looking for something for around 20 minutes until everyone had finished getting changed, and then I would quickly get changed to kind of avoid anyone seeing me. And then after the game, despite how kind of muddy and horrible I would just sometimes wash my face only, and just kind of lie to people saying I've had a shower, but then just put my school uniform or some other clothes on. So yeah, those were kind of big points for me during secondary school. The other turning point was when I actually lost a lot of weight. So I went from 18.5 stone down to 13 in the space of around 6 months, 5 months, something like that. That was weird because I then started to kind of like all these things around, like your friends groups changed, girls started being interested. It was just before I went to university as well. So I kind of felt like this is great. I'm getting attention for the first time in my life. I had, my first ever interest from a girl. So it was kind of like, oh, this weight, looking this way works. But I had to lose the weight because I was playing so much rugby. Weight started to just drop off, but also the weight I had previously as an 18.5 stone, 15, 16-year-old was so heavy on my shins that my shin bones started to kind of split down the middle. So it was like shin splints, but like a really severe version. So the doctors basically told me I had to lose weight in order to carry on playing rugby. So part of me, the reason for losing the weight was I had to do it for myself in order to carry on playing. But then it opened up this whole other kind of avenue of opportunity, which I'd never experienced before. And then going into uni, I was like 14 stone or so. And then I was getting, attention from girls. I had great friends groups. I was playing rugby. But this is the weird thing, even though I looked different, I looked, slimmer, I was a bit more defined, I still had the issues around, going for showers after rugby or getting changed with people in the same room. Like that never really left for some reason. And that was weird because I just couldn't shake the self-body image kind of concern that other people are going to judge me, or, the confidence issue to just get changed and have a shower and not be judged. It just sort of stayed with me, and that stayed for like 3 years. And yeah, there were times where, you'd get drunk during these rugby sessions, and then everyone would kind of take their shirts off and stuff. And I think by that point, everyone was just so pissed that you didn't care. And the same with me, I was sort of so pissed that I just didn't really bother thinking, or I didn't have that in me to think in that moment. But during a normal day where you're not drinking and you actually have to get changed in front of your teammates, or you have to go for a shower after the game, I just didn't have that in me. I just couldn't do it. So again, that was a sort of a weird turning point, in that I felt better because I had changed the way I look, because I had to, but I couldn't shake the mental impact that all of the years of being judged and the confidence and the self-worth, I couldn't shake that. And then after uni, the weight kind of started to get back to how it was before. I was back up at like 16, 17 stone. I was working as well. So, I was, drinking a lot more. I was out with friends, eating rubbish, living on my own. So then again, I kind of went through that sort of roller coaster of being back to being big. But then I had the mindset to warrant that. I was shy of everything. I wouldn't ever go to the gym because I didn't want to get changed in front of people, or I didn't want people to judge me for the way I looked. So yeah, then another turning point for me was when I met my now wife. I had started gymming again just because I was single, I was alone, I didn't have anything else to do, and I just kind of had a bit of a wake up, really. And I just thought, like, what am I doing with my life? Why don't I just go back into working out, because I was just fed up of looking the way that I did. And so I didn't have Instagram, or I don't even think Instagram was around then. I just started to work out, started to lose some weight. I just happened to meet my wife. And yeah, she just didn't judge me for the way that I looked, and she still doesn't. But 10 years later, I still can't take my shirt off in front of her, or I feel shy taking my shirt off if I'm taking the kids swimming, for example. So these are all kind of, it's like a wave of different types of conditions and kind of ways of thinking that I've been throughout the 38 years, different kind of moments of my life where I just feel there is a deep down issue that I just can't seem to shake. And perhaps the more that I kind of talk about it, and the more that I feel comfortable doing it, because I can see other people doing that, or kind of behaving in that sort of freer, more open way, maybe that will help me. So I think that's the sort of the aim here, is I'm kind of helping myself by helping you guys. But I really kind of need that support and, that kind of hand holding in a way. Like if I see a whole beach full of people who are just free, walking around shirtless, however they look, not giving a shit, that will probably inspire me to do the same thing, rather than people staring at me and feeling judged, or looking at each other when I'm walking past. Like I want that kind of environment where you just feel like you can do whatever you want, but that, unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the personal stories and turning points for me. As you can kind of see, it varies, but those are kind of all the things that are boiled down to today, where I just want to kind of make some sort of difference and make other people feel more comfortable to be themselves, to understand that we're all different, we're all still just as important as each other, and just not to be afraid to, to kind of open up and be yourself. It's hard. Yeah, it's really difficult, but I'm hoping, each day by day, these are small steps, but they'll all lead to a bigger movement and a bigger community. So yeah, that's it. Sorry, some of the answers were quite long and probably off topic at times, but that's just me. That's just how I speak. My mind tends to wander and kind of tag on to other bits and pieces. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed that. And obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, the only way we're going to really try and push this message out is by subscribing, by liking, by sharing. So do everything and anything you can to help me out, to help push this message out there. And yeah, hopefully we'll start seeing some results and seeing a happier male audience with some great success stories about how this channel and brand has helped them. So until next time, take it easy, and I'll speak to you soon.